Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another amazing podcast on Bows, Bros, and Bucks. This is episode number 22. His name is Joe, and he grew up in some of the hardest states, biasly, that I say, in New England, and then ended up crushing a giant buck in the Midwest, fulfilling his dream to harvest one of the coolest bucks I have ever seen. Enjoy.
I don't even know what to do. I just shot a dual. I swear to God, he's 200 inches. He's 200 inches. I just shot a 200-inch whitetail. I just shot a 200-inch whitetail. I just shot a 200-inch whitetail right there. I just shot a 200-inch whitetail right there. Oh my God. 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 I just shot a booty crockett. I just shot a.
That's what you come here for, buddy. Look at the width on that thing. It's got Joe's 2024 Ohio buck. Look at that thing.
Look at the drop.
Look at the drop
Look at
time.
the
He's got,
drop.
oh, still got, no,
Look
still
at this.
got
Still got velvet
on his drop.
Look at that. Look at that.
Look at this thing, people. Oh my God.
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Look at that. Public land. First sit. First night. My first 3 hours in Ohio. I drove all the way from Boston. I drove 16 hours to get here in total. And here we are.
Look at that, boys. Huh?
Are you kidding me? Look at the palmation. Look at the Browtines
The
in that deer.
Browtines. Those are the biggest
Are you
Browtines I've ever
kidding
seen
me?
in a deer.
Look at the Browtines in that deer. Look at the drop.
Look at the shot you made, boy. You did well, buddy. Under pressure. Look at that thing.
Imagine buck
Look
fever.
how wide he
Imagine
is.
what buck fever does to me.
Oh, he's going to be a pretty mount.
Hey, how are you, Joe?
Good, how are you? Finally got on a phone call with you.
Yeah, sorry it's been taking so long for me to get a hold of you. I've been super busy.
No, I've been seeing you on Instagram, traveling all over. That's awesome, dude.
Yeah, it's been crazy with family and stuff, but I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. I didn't even know you were from Mass or like living there.
Yeah, I thought you knew, 'cause you were always a part of Bow Hunt Mass, and I remember seeing your deer posting on Bow Hunt Mass. Been following them forever, so I always thought you were from Mass and not from New Hampshire. So it's really cool we're able to connect.
Yeah, luckily it's just pretty close next door. My backyard is basically Massachusetts, where my parents live. So.
Oh, that's sweet. Yeah, I've hunted a lot of Western Mass, but just starting out in Eastern Mass.
Nice. Yeah, it's definitely different. The Berkshires and all that stuff are super fun to hunt. Big woods,
way
but
different.
it's definitely different. That's closer to New Hampshire hunting, if anything.
Right.
But yeah, do you want to just give some background to people listening to the podcast, who you are, how long you've been hunting?
Absolutely. So I grew up as a kid with a father that loved hunting. I grew up right where the New York border meets the Massachusetts border meets the Vermont border. So that little corner right there is where I grew up. So I grew up hunting a lot of big woods, rifle hunting in the Green Mountains, Vermont, and the Berkshires, Massachusetts. I grew up with a lot of rifle hunting and if it's brown, it's down kind of mentality. So I've always been used to hunting, basket racks and 4-pointers and 6-pointers, and that was just, kind of the norm for me and the norm for people around me. But I've also grown up as a kid just watching YouTube videos of guys in the Midwest and all over the country shooting, giant deer with a bow out of a tree stand, and I was just obsessed.
Totally hear you there. It's very similar for me and different in other ways. For me, I didn't grow up hunting, but grew up definitely surrounded by the outdoors and stuff. But I had a dad that loved guns and other stuff, and he was willing to try to take me out a couple times, but we didn't have a clue what we were doing, so I kind of just learned on my own. Were you near Isaac Young then? Kind of where he lives?
Isaac Young. I don't even know who Isaac Young is, to be honest.
Oh, okay. He's a tracker. He's close to the Green Mountains. He does some YouTube videos and stuff, but
Oh, cool.
I'm pretty sure he lives. Oh gosh, I'm trying to remember the name. Where in Vermont, but yeah, it's a pretty similar area to what you were talking about. It seems like, because it's like close to the border.
Yeah, it's like those big woods, smaller deer, lower deer density kind of hunting out there.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, that's super cool. So how old are you for people listening?
Yep. So I'm 20 years old, and I've been hunting since I was 7. In Vermont, you can get your hunting license at any age, as long as you're hunting with a parent or guardian that's licensed and over the age of 18. So I always grew up hunting with my dad. I mean, ever since I was 2, 3 years old, my dad would throw me on the back of his backpack and go moose scouting. So I got to be able to see my first moose at like 4 years old. I haven't even seen one since because the population of moose in Vermont went down so quickly. But I've always been exposed to the outdoors. I got my first hunting license at 7. I passed a hunter safety course in Vermont. And I shot my first deer. And I mean, ever since then, I've hunted Vermont every single year since 7 years old. And I've probably killed somewhere between 20 and 25 whitetails, more like 20 whitetails, because in Vermont we have the youth day and we have the regular season. So you can shoot one in each season. So we always just went out every youth day and always opening day and all through the season we rifle hunted. My dad was never a big bow hunter because it's kind of difficult in Vermont, to be honest, to bow hunt because of deer density. A lot of guys do it, and really skilled guys do it. But I shot my first deer with a bow in Vermont at the age of 16. And ever since then, just bow hunting has totally taken over my drive compared to rifle hunting. I'm obsessed with it.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Yeah, like I started with the bow hunting, and then now I think this year is my first muzzleloader deer. So it was kind of different. I can be more aggressive, and I don't have to hunt necessarily just off topography. I can kind of do some more calling, be aggressive, and be a little bit more tactful. So it's kind of fun to see both sides of it.
Yeah, it is. It's fun to hunt both sides of the terrain. I mean, you have guys that are rifle hunting and tracking, and there's so many cool YouTube videos now of guys tracking with the GoPros on their shoulders, and that's what we used to do as kids growing up. So I think I've really fell in love with that. The YouTube basically is what kicked it off for me, was watching guys in the Midwest with bows in Iowa and Illinois and Ohio shooting these deer that I can only dream of as a kid because I'm just used to seeing the same 4-pointers and 6-pointers. So I was just obsessed with the idea of trying to hunt the Midwest, and I cannot believe it paid off the way it did.
Yeah, so what got you into going out there? Because it was public land. Do you want to just talk about kind of the big buck that you got and what kind of sparked the conversation?
Yeah. So 2 years ago, my friend contacted me he's from upstate New York, just about 35 minutes south of Lake George. That's where I live now. And he said he was always a big deer hunter around in New York, and we were always great friends in high school. And he said, hey, my neighbor hunts this piece of public out in Ohio. It's this big piece of public, and there's a campground and stuff. Do you want to go with me? And we'll rent a little camper and we'll go together. And I said, absolutely. So we were 18 at the time. We jumped in the truck together and drove 16 hours to southeastern Ohio to this big piece of public land, and slept in this little tiny camper for 6 days. And it was my first time hunting outside of the Northeast. And when I first arrived to Ohio, it was like a whole different world. I mean, what I struggled with in Vermont was just finding sign to hunt. And what I struggled with in Ohio is picking which sign to hunt, which is just insane how much sign there is and how many more deer there is when I got out there. It was kind of like, I've dreamt of it so long as a kid, and to finally see it in person I was just in heaven. With the size of the rubs that you see and the scrapes on the ground, it's like just amazing. You
definitely learn the difference between what scrapes are important, what aren't, And when you get into a lot of sign like that or in a state like that, that was the same thing I found in Idaho. Is like, well, which bucks do I want to chase at this point? You could almost pick and choose.
Right, which was super fun to me to be able to pick and choose a buck to hunt because,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in the Northeast it's kind of, you know, you're either walking and tracking or you're just sitting and waiting for, you know, a legal buck even, hoping to even see a legal buck. So to be out there and to pick which sign, pick which scrapes are huntable, and, you know, picking old, you know, reoccurringly hit rubs year over year was like the tactic that I went in with when I killed this deer. So we were driving around one afternoon in between hunts, my buddy and I 2 years ago, and this giant buck crossed the road in front of us. And I'll never forget, it's the biggest buck I've ever seen in person up to that point. And I was just starstruck over that piece that he came out of. It was kind of this big ridge section that overlooked these private land, cornfields, and private land. So it was kind of the edge of the public. And I remember he came off the public and went down into the cornfields. And I was like, I mean, that's the spot to be. So I hunted that ridge system for 2 days before I had to go. And I had an encounter with a really nice buck, probably like a 140s, 130s, 8-pointer, 10-pointer. It was kind of last light, so I never was able to get a shot off at him. But just that feeling of being able to see a whitetail like that in front of you, you know, when you're used to seeing 4-pointers and spike horns, I mean, your whole body comes apart, it feels like. We went back. Yeah, we didn't go back the year after, so we didn't go back last year because we were really busy, you know, just starting out college and stuff, and honestly, just both of us didn't have the time to get out there. But
Sure.
We said to ourselves over the summer, like, we need to go back in October. We need to go back. And we ended up doing it. So it was a Thursday. We don't have classes at Friday. I go to school at Babson College in Wellesley, Massachusetts, which is just 25 minutes outside of Boston. And I left there on a Thursday evening, and I drove home up to upstate New York, gathered up all my gear and stuff. We met up, and we rode out to Ohio, another 16-hour trip. And we got there we set up by Friday afternoon. We had the camp all set up and everything. And remember, we went and scouted our first spot, that same ridge system that big deer came off of 2 years ago, because I put a pin on it and I said, Dad, this is exactly where I want to go. My dad ended up going with me, which was super cool because he's very knowledgeable in terms of deer hunting and stuff, and pretty much taught me everything that I know. So it was really cool to have him with me. Are you saddle hunting, or what are you doing? So the problem with me as a deer hunter, it's my biggest downfall, is I'm deathly afraid of heights.
Sure.
I will get into a tree
common
stand.
thing people don't talk about.
Yeah, they don't. I know a lot of guys say you need to be high up, you need to be 20 feet in the tree. And all my friends are like that. You know, I get made fun of my friends back home of setting my sets low and you know, not getting too high up in the tree. But I'll hunt just off of a platform, like a platform stand. And I'll carry in sticks, and I'll just set a set. That's the way I usually like to hunt. But I don't set my sets very high. I mean, I killed this deer. I could have jumped and touched my bottom of my tree stand. And I've killed all my deer like that pretty much. I think the main thing about it is just, you know, playing your wind and making sure you have good backdrop.
Sure.
That's just the way I think about it. But it's brought me a lot of success, and a lot of people don't think that you need to be super high up, but I like to be low.
No, and oftentimes, like, I've talked about this before on a podcast, but fawns and does, especially when does know that there's like set tree stands at like 15 to 20 feet high, what they'll do is they'll oh, sorry, my timer's going off. They'll stomp their feet, and they'll leave interdigital, like a little liquid in between their toes. They'll leave an excess amount of that to alert the other fawns next to them, and then they'll look up at the tree stand just to explain that, like, hey, here's danger if there's someone in it, but I'm just going to show you and teach you. And then they pass that on year to year to the new offspring, and that's how they kind of teach them about that danger. Because a lot of times deer will be looking for tree stands, and that's why ground hunting can be effective. But also, if they know their terrain really well or a certain property, they know when something's different. So I either try to get up extremely high, and I'm the same way. Like, I'm actually afraid of heights. So, like, except for roller coasters and maybe tree stands, I do not want anything like a floor dropping at a water park, like any of that stuff.
Yep.
I have to be very secure in the tree stand. That's a lot of the reason why I use a climber and not a saddle as much, because I feel a lot more safe, and also it's easier on my back to be in a climber. But
yeah, I think, in terms of mobility and, quickly setting up, a climber or a saddle is the way to go. And I just wish I wasn't so freaked out to where the point I could do that. Because I want to, but I know I'd just get too shaky in the tree, and it just wouldn't be good. But my dad, as a kid, would show me around to these local guys that he'd show me. Yeah, he fell out of a tree stand, and this is, he has a broken leg now, or he's in a wheelchair now, and that kind of stuck with me as a kid. I was like, I need to be really careful in tree stands and setting tree stands. Be really methodical and careful. So that didn't help much in my height. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, so all those stories as a kid kind of drove into my head, and I didn't like heights in general, and then that on top of it, I was like, I wish I could be a ground hunter.
Yeah, it's definitely different, especially for bow hunting. It seems it's definitely a lot more necessary to be in a tree than gun hunting, for sure.
Definitely, yeah.
And I think that's a lot of times what we'll do if they do have that height issue, they just gun hunt, which is fine.
That's really, I've never heard of that does will actually teach their fawns tree stands. I mean, that's amazing. Like, I have a buddy who has a farm out in western New York, and he tells me that the does will come up on the field edge with their heads in the air looking at the skylight, looking for people in trees, or a guy in a tree stand, which is crazy to hear that they're that, the does have seen it so much and they've been around it so much that they know to look up, which I find is super interesting.
Yeah, and that's why I'm mature doe. A lot of times people will try to shoot them to break that cycle.
Yeah, they will. Yeah, if they blow, they go. That's what I've heard.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But I mean, I got really lucky. It was kind of like the perfect storm. I actually shot this deer on my first sit on this trip. First ever sit, first set. It was just, I set the stand 2.5 hours. So when we got there, we set up the campsite, went to bed, got back up in the morning, slept in because we had a long day the day before and didn't want to go in early in the morning and bust deer on the spots I wanted to hunt. So we went into that same piece that I told you about that big deer crossed into the cornfield 2 years ago. And I went deeper this time, and it was this main ridge that we walked up, and about 1.5 miles in, and then these finger ridges start to come out on each side, and they're maybe, at most 100 yards long, these finger ridges. And the first finger ridge that I get to, there isn't a ton of sign on it, and there isn't a ton of sign. So we kept moving and we got to the second finger ridge. And at the base of where the main ridge met the finger ridge, there were these 2 old signpost rubs. I mean, just like giant rubs, at least from what I'm used to seeing. They were the size of telephone poles.
Sure.
And the one tree that was rubbed, he had only the center portion rubbed out of it. Like they'll usually rub the whole tree. The whole tree will be like a normal rub. But this tree just had like a slit rub. It was like a tiny sliver in it, but it was destroyed. Just the sliver was maybe 1.5 inches wide, but destroyed in this huge tree. And I remember looking at my dad, and I was like, what kind of, what makes that kind of rub? That's very unusual. And we were like, that's interesting. And the tree next to it was even bigger, and that was rubbed too, kind of unusual. And we were like, this is a big deer, but, he might have big Browtines or something, we joked about.
Yeah,
and
we walked. You didn't know you were hunting a moose.
No, I didn't know I was hunting old caribou Browtines. The Browtines on them are 10.5 inches, which are just insane. But we finally walk out into this finger ridge, and it's the most concentrated deer sign I have ever seen in my entire life. It was like bed here, scrape there, you walk another 5 feet, it's a big rub there, scrape there, and it was just like no-brainer. And this was maybe only an hour into our scouting, and I was planning on taking, maybe the first day or 2 days to just strictly scout.
Sure.
To get my best chances at the 10 days I was planning on being there.
Was this above the fields too, like on a saddle? Or?
Yes.
Oh.
Yep. So this is above the fields. It's that ridge system that I hunted 2 years ago, but I didn't go as deep in. This year I went a lot deeper in, about a mile deeper than I was before.
How far from the fields would you say you were?
Oh, I was, that's got to be about 2.5 miles.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So and I wanted to find some sign closer, but there wasn't a lot of sign closer, to where the fields were, and where the public starts is still, 600-700 yards away from the field edge. So there is some distance in between them, but the deer are still traveling to it. But by the time I got
sense. I mean, I've only killed one buck in New England near a field. The rest, the bucks that I'm hunting, the old ones, they don't go in them in daylight anyways, so that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I've killed some deer off the field edge, but as you said, like those bigger deer, they're more deeper in the bigger pieces of public. They know that they're being pressured, especially on a public land piece like that in Ohio. There's a ton of pressure there. I mean, there's a ton of different guys inside the campground. They've been hunting there for the week before. They've been there for 8-9 days. But made some really cool friends from all over the country, from Tennessee and North Carolina, guys that were traveling to Ohio. Met some really cool people, but it was pressured. And that's why I wanted to go deeper than I did 2 years ago, because I don't think I respected that pressure enough as I did this year. So we got into the piece, and I got on this finger ridge, and my dad and I looked at each other and we said, what more can we ask for here? He goes, I know you want to scout more, but this is insane. And we were like, yeah, I mean, this is crazy. So then we didn't carry in any stands or sticks or anything. We went back down to the truck, grabbed all the gear, grabbed the whole setup, hiked back in, and we set up on this big tree, wrapped the stand around this big tree. We were reaching our arms around to get around it, but it was really good backdrop. And as I said before, I think backdrop is the most important thing, rather than height. If you're just setting up, going into a piece and setting up. So as I said, we set it only 10 foot high, and as soon as we set it, we were like, all right, let's get out of there. So we went back, and now it's probably 2 o'clock, and it doesn't get dark there until like 7 o'clock, I think, was like end of shooting light. So I went back in went to the campsite, had lunch, went back in at 3 o'clock, and got in my set. And I sat there from 3 until 6:45, and I didn't see a single thing my entire set. Like not a squirrel, not a peep. It was like a dead woods. But it's my first sit in Ohio, and I'm just obsessed with the Midwest. So the nerves are really high. That first set, you're like waiting for anything to happen.
Is your dad with you?
He's not. I mean, I could grab him, absolutely. He's just right upstairs.
Gotcha. No, sorry. I meant like with you, like in the stand.
Oh, no. I mean, no, he dropped me off. So he dropped me off at the spot, and I was going into my set. Yep. So he dropped me off, and I walked in alone to the set. And I got there, and the nerves are just pumping. I mean, I'm in Ohio. It's my first set. I'm on the most concentrated sign and the biggest route I've ever seen in my life. I mean, I'm just ecstatic. But I'm not seeing anything. So by the time it gets, 6:30, I'm a little, not discouraged one bit, but, getting a little bit more relaxed. Like, okay, like we're just hunting,
Sure.
And I listened to a podcast before I went out on the ride out, the Hunter podcast, and Stan Potts was on there, and he was talking about calling. I wanted to learn more about calling because I was always one of those guys that didn't like to call unless, you see a deer, you need to bring him just a little closer, not blind calling. But Stan made a point that that late October, I killed him October 26th, and that late October that week, he says is the number one time to be cold calling out through, in the big woods or anywhere.
The 26th is one of my favorite scrape hunting days.
Yes, it was just insane how many scrapes there were on the ground, like when I got there, because I got there the 26th, pretty much the 25th, and it was just insane how many scrapes you'd see. But it's a totally different world out there. But when I got into my set, after like an hour of sitting there, I started going the most aggressive calling sequences I've ever done. I was taking my rattling bag and I was whacking it against my tree to start the sequence, like a huge just crack. It would hear it echo through the woods. And I'd do a rattling sequence, and I'd let it sit, and I would do it again after 45 minutes, just crack, and just super aggressive, super loud, rattling. And I thought, well, it's my first day, I might as well try it, and if it doesn't work, then I'll slow down. Maybe what Stan said wasn't right. But it turned out he was really right. So about 20 minutes before shooting light, I did my calling sequence just 5 minutes before, and I said, okay, I'm done. I'm going to sit until shooting light and see what happens. And about 15 minutes before shooting light ended, we had these 3 raccoons come in, and they started scurrying around and running around below me, and I'm watching them and stuff, entertained. And then they finally scurry away, and I look to my right, and the way I'm facing, to my right is the end of the finger ridge, and right at the end of the finger ridge, it's a huge drop into this bowl. And I wasn't expecting any deer to be coming, almost vertically, like a vertical wall up to the top of the finger ridge. I wasn't expecting deer to come that way. I expected them to come to my left, towards like where the main ridge was. And after the scurrying around, I hear that crunch, and I looked, and he's standing there with the skylight behind him. So all I see is silhouette. It's about 10 minutes before shooting light, and I look to my right, and he's there at the base of the finger ridge, like right at the edge of where it drops off. And I'm just like starstruck. For one, is how does the deer get there without me seeing him? It's my first thought. And he's only like maybe 50 yards. And my second thought is, after I looked at him, was, oh my gosh, this is a huge deer. This is just huge. I mean, this is something that I've dreamed of since I was a little kid.
Yeah.
The first thing I remember seeing was his drop tine on his right side and the silhouette of it behind it, and I remember putting my head down. I'm the type of hunter that gets really, really worked up when you see a big. I'm a major.
Look at it.
No. I had just too much buck fever. The year before, I missed like 120-inch 8-pointer in the big woods with my bow because of buck fever, just getting too rattled, too worked up. So I knew I needed to make it happen. As soon as I saw the deer, it was like a total rush of emotions that I had to control.
That happened to me this year with my mule deer. Like, I had like a 165-inch mule deer at 60 yards, and I have never shook that much.
Oh.
I mean, I shook a lot for some of the deer that I shot last year, but I was almost calm in the moment because I didn't look at their antlers, and I was just like, look at his body, look at his body, look at his body, like telling myself that. And I got the shakes like right after, and like the heavy breathing right before, but I was able to calm myself. But this year, I've never had it so bad, and I think I've only missed 2 deer ever with my bow, and that was, of course, it was my longest shot ever because I'm mule deer hunting. We don't take shots like that. We can't take shots like that in the big woods in New Hampshire.
Right.
You don't get to see the deer unless they're 40 yards away from you, if that.
Exactly.
So, it's a different game, but I was shaking like a leaf. I'm like, I'm supposed to be this big hunter, and I'm shaking like a little kid, like I'm freezing in a tree stand, like need some hand warmers or something. I'm like, it's 70 degrees out, and I'm shaking like a leaf.
Right. But that's why we do it.
Idaho people say, I'm shaking like a whore in church.
Yeah, like a whore in church. Exactly. I've heard that a lot. But that's why I love deer hunting so much, is that feeling that it gives you.
Yeah.
I love fishing, and that feeling will never compare. No fish I'll ever catch will ever compare to, shooting a whitetail. That feeling is just so overwhelming. It's almost like an addiction that us deer hunters have for it, I think.
Especially bow hunting. I mean, it's just in my mind, it's way more personal. I don't shake as much when I'm gun hunting.
No, definitely not.
When I can prepare myself so much, I don't know what it is, whether it's drawing back the bow. You honestly just have to experience it for people listening. Like, if you haven't bow hunted, you just can't really put in the words. It's an adrenaline rush, but I hate phrasing it that way because then it makes it sound like bad.
You just do it for sport and that, yeah.
Yeah.
But I grew up rifle hunting, and I never had those feelings. That the feeling of bow hunting is, as you said, is just so much more monumental than it is with the gun.
Agreed.
I mean, there's so many more different factors that come into it compared to rifle hunting. You have to practice so much more with a compound than you would, sighting in your rifle or just shooting. I think it takes a lot more, better breathing techniques, going over your checklist, especially when you're drawing, checking your peep sight, checking, your kisser or however you shoot, and just going through your checklist. I think that was my, the number one thing that helps me calm down when I'm bow hunting is, going through your checklist as you're drawing.
Agreed. Yeah, it's I'm lucky I don't have target panic when it comes to like bow hunting, but one of my buddies, it's funny, he has like a super nice bow, and he probably can shoot better than me, like at a range and stuff with his bow. But I mean, that kid target panics like so bad. Like you could have a deer at 5 yards and he might miss just because it's just I think part of it's when we're in New England, we're so used to not seeing deer. When you do see a buck, you just lose your freaking mind because you're not used to it. It's not like driving around in the Midwest or even out west where you're like, okay, I just saw 50 deer tonight glassing the fields, or they're near the car. Like, you get used to them.
Yeah, you get desensitized to it. That was like the biggest thing was I'd drive around and scout for my buddies after I shot my deer on the first day, and I had 3 of my buddies from high school with me, also out there hunting. So I'd drive around. I'd see more bucks in one midday driving around than I would all season back at home.
Exactly.
So it was like a whole different world.
Yeah.
So when I'm in my set and it's about like 10 minutes, before shooting light, and he's there, and the first thing I thought was just don't look at his antlers, because I saw the drop, and as soon as I saw the drop, it's just when you see a drop tine on a deer, just to see a deer like that is just amazing. I never thought I'd be able to see a deer with a drop tine, let alone be able to harvest one. So as soon as I saw the silhouette of the drop, yeah. It was just a weird feeling seeing that in person and knowing he's like 35 yards coming at me. So he's coming at me, and I remember look at his body, like you said, just look at his body, calm down. And he puts his head down at 30 yards facing straight at me and rubs this tree, and it's dead silent in the woods. No, light wind. My wind is perfect, but light wind. And he takes that tree and he bends it right over in front of me and whacks, like the top of the trees, whacking the branches in the other trees, and he's just standing there destroying it. He is like upset. You can tell this deer was fired up. He went to that tree with his ears back and his head down, and he was just angry. And I really think it was from the aggressive tactic of calling that I was going with. Just super aggressive, loud, nonstop, almost like annoying calling. And when he came over the top of that ridge, he was looking
aggressive.
Yeah, I've never been used to, calling that aggressive or hunting that aggressive because, back home here in New England, you can't really call that much because there's not a good enough buck-to-doe ratio to where they're going to get fired up.
Exactly. Yeah.
At another buck being in their territory.
They're not competing. I mean, they're competing, but the way I explain it to people is like, unless you're on a high ridge above like a swamp in New Hampshire or whatever, generally, unless the deer is extremely dumb and generally like a 3-year-old, he's not going to come into calling. Generally, this is obviously every buck is different. We all have different personalities. There's one kid in high school that wants to fight all the time, and then there's another kid that's a shy little kid. But oftentimes, some of the deer with giant antlers, they're pretty boys, and they want to stay back, and they don't want to fight. Obviously, this buck that you got and like the buck that I called Moose that I got, they were both fighters. They both thrashed trees. They wanted to lay down sign like crazy, and they wanted to show who's boss. So that's crazy.
Yeah, it was really crazy. I mean, well, back in New England, we don't have a big age class, at least where I'm from in Western Mass. We don't have a large variety of age class deer, like, a bunch of 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, and 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds. Like, we have a bunch of 2-year-olds and maybe an occasional 3-year-old, and occasionally maybe a 4-year-old, maybe, like once every 3 years, maybe. So I just never called back at home. That wasn't a part of our, how we hunted. It just wasn't a thing. But until I listened to that podcast, and I kind of changed my mind, and I was like, well, I might as well try it. And it worked out. He came up over that ridge, and he was just, his head was up, and he was searching the whole way. He was looking for who was making all that noise. And I think those raccoons scurrying below me kind of, rustled up those leaves and rustled up the ground and made a lot of ground noise. Because he was there, minutes after those raccoons were there. So I've seen videos
from you.
Yeah, no, I don't know what they're doing. They were just running. They were just running around. I mean, I've never seen raccoons like that in daylight. I don't know if they're more common out where I was hunting or what, but I've never seen raccoons in the daylight. There was a group of 3 or 4 of them, and they were just walking around and playing with each other half, and making the leaves rustle up. And I think he heard that combined with the calling, and really thought that there was a buck up there messing with his bedroom. I mean, the place looked like his bedroom. It was obvious.
So this is the morning, right?
This is an afternoon. This is the afternoon after I got there. So that morning is when we scouted, and then I set the set up for probably 1-2 o'clock, and went back in for 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So now it's 6:45, and he's coming, and he's sitting there, and he's thrashing that tree in front of me, and the tops of the trees are hitting each other, and I'm just trying my hardest not to shake. I mean, my heart is pumping more than it's ever pumped. And he finally picks his head up from the tree, stops thrashing it. He takes 4 or 5 more steps, and he's coming right into a shooting window. So now I've got my bow in my hand. I'm ready to draw. I'm just looking at his hooves. I'm just basically looking where he's standing and looking at his body and making sure he's in the window. And he takes a step into the window, and then now he's kind of, apprehensive of what he wants to do. He doesn't see any deer, so he's kind of nervous. You can tell he's getting a little wary, what's going on? I thought there was a big fight going on up here, and there's nothing up here. So what's going on? So he's stepping, and he's taking a step back to go back down the ridge, and then he takes another step to come into the shooting window. And then he turns back and he stands there, and you can tell he's just got his nose up in the air, and he's just sniffing, trying to catch a scent of something. And he's kind of, at this point, he's deciding, I think, whether he wants to go back down to where he came from, or if he wants to continue searching his ridge. And he's standing there, and I'm about ready to go full draw, because if he takes one more step, he's in my window, and I'm gonna shoot him right there. And he finally takes that step that I'm talking about. And I draw, and then he takes one more step, he's okay, I'm going to go back down the ridge. He takes one more step to where he kind of turns quartering away from me. And he's full quartering away, and it's, 5-8 minutes before shooting light, so it's real dark, hard to see my pins. And I took my first pin, and I could see it on the silhouette. If it was not on his body, I can see it against the lighter grass color. But as soon as you bring it on his body, you can't see it. So I had to drop my pin below him, raise my pin to where I couldn't see it anymore, and I was about where I wanted to be. And I settled my pin, and I let it fly, and whack. You hear that, that big pop, that that, you hit the lungs, you can hear it. It's a different kind of sound.
Yeah, and the cavity, once you pump that, you know the sound.
Exactly, and I heard that sound, but it's really difficult because it's kind of like a blur after this because it was so much adrenaline and so much just like, oh my gosh, what did I just do?
Trying not to fall out of the tree stand.
Yeah, exactly. Trying not to fall out of the tree, exactly. But I immediately, after I shot him, the first thing I thought of was I need to get my reaction to this because nobody's going to believe me when I get back to camp if I made a bad shot, if we never find the deer. I immediately pull my phone out on Snapchat, and I click the record button, and I'm just flipping out. And I start to record, and then 2 seconds later I think, Joe, you need to listen for this deer crashing.
Yeah.
So in the video you hear me like totally flipping out or like breathing super hard and then stopping my breathing and just listening. And I'm hearing him run down into the bowl, and then I hear the crash. And I just totally came unglued after that, just flipping out. I took a video of myself flipping out, like just practically like could barely breathe.
I gotta see that.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna send you those. Those are funny to watch. Yeah, those are pretty funny to watch. But I
looked like a psycho after I shot my 147 last year. I was like, oh my gosh! I'm like, but I looked like I'd probably just took crack or something. I was like,
yeah, that's exactly how that video is. Like the camera's shaking like at 1,000,000 miles an hour. But I love that side of deer hunting. Like when you can see the reaction of the guys after they shoot them. I think that's what makes it really special.
Yeah, not when it's shaking, like just talking like, oh yeah, smoked them. Yeah.
Yeah. No, they want to be tough guys. I don't care to be a tough guy at all. Like I really don't. I want to feel the moment. That's what I hunt for is that moment, that feeling. It's just nothing's better. So I immediately called my dad. I kept calling my dad like 6 or 7 times and no answer. And because he's probably driving to come pick me up. He's getting ready to pick me up. There isn't a lot of service out there. And finally I get a hold of him. And at this point, I'm sitting in my tree stand bawling my eyes out. Totally coming unglued. Like, I cannot believe what I just saw. But I remember telling my dad on the phone, he had no Browtines. It was just junk. I mean, it was just like bone everywhere because the last light, I only got a few glances at antlers because I wanted to just look at his body. But I kept saying to him, he has no Browtines. He has no Browtines. It's just bone. It's just antler everywhere. Little did I know he'd have giant moose paddle 10-inch Browtines, but I couldn't tell.
He was 200 inches back.
Yeah, no, there's a video of me saying to my dad in the video saying, I just shot a 200-inch whitetail. I just shot a 200-inch whitetail. Because seriously, it's exactly that. Because I thought that because it was so dark and so much. Yeah, it was so dark and so much mass. And he's got these cool points on the top of his Browtines. So I thought it might have been there was just stuff everywhere, I thought.
Extra tines or something.
Yeah, like it could have been connected to the tines, or it could have been multiple tines coming in together to form like that kind of darkness in the middle of his head. And I thought, maybe he just had stuff everywhere. That's what I thought. So he just had stuff everywhere, and the drop and everything. I've never seen deer like this in person, so it was insane to see him like that.
What before you talk about the recovery?
Yeah.
Do you have some of the measurements, just like to give people a perspective? I mean, this thing's got to have 5-inch circumference at the tips of his Browtines that are 10 inches.
Yeah, like the tips. We didn't measure the tips, but for reference, I can't take. I mean, I'm not even close. It's basically the width of my hand. I sent you a cool picture on text that I'll show you. But I can almost hold. I can barely wrap. I can't touch my fingers together at the top of his Browtines. No matter how much I try, I'm not even close right now. I'm holding it right now.
It might be 7 inches, to be honest. I don't know.
I don't know because I never measured it, but I mean, they're basically 10.5 inches tall. They're as thick. The palmation on his left side is as thick as the palm of my hand. Just insane walking us. He's got 10.5-inch Browtines. He has 22-inch main beams. He's 22 inches inside spread, and the drop is 7 inches something? 7 inches 3/8. And he's still got a big chunk of velvet on the bottom of his Browtines, which I think is
did see that. And he
Yeah, it's
broke
all
the other drop
dried out.
time that looks even thicker than that one.
Yes, yeah, it's even bigger on the other side. I got that picture I sent to you after I took him to the taxidermist. I got him to froze his cape. A guy at the local taxidermist froze my cape for me while I was going to be there. And his father is a certified scorer for Big Buck Club Ohio. So I had him scored right there, officially scored. And he scored out at 158 and 7/8, so 159. The main measurement loss on the deer is his main beams are skinnier than his Browtines. Like, I think he grew
100%.
all of his mass into his Browtines. So the main beams are skinny. Like, when you look at them, it's almost like his main beams grow into the Browtines, and then his main beams are like separate. Like, they're like an add-on. They're skinnier than where it comes into at the base of the Browtines.
And did you ask if there was any other bucks that had that genetic, or was he just a freak where it's just like he grew like that? Because I know in Maine they have places where Browtines will grow weird like that. Like, there's a video on YouTube from like the Hunt Maine guys, and he kills one with 8-inch Browtines, and it looks similar to that. They curve, but they don't have extra points. But it's like really thick mass, but then the beams, they just don't have any tine length because it all was put into the brows.
Right. I saw one post on Trophy Bucks of Ohio on Instagram. There was one post where a guy had, from Ohio, a different part of Ohio than me, of Browtines similar to mine, like very similar, but just a little shorter, but they had that palmation. I'm not sure what it is, but I asked him, and he said, those big deer genetics are out there, but he's never seen Browtines like that. And he's been a taxidermist there for a while. So
that's
I'm just super grateful.
Deer. And that's the thing, though, like, that's why I picked yours to, like, ask you for a podcast, because it's not uncommon to hear about booners in Ohio, obviously. Like, that's a pretty common thing. But the thing that struck me was it was public land. It wasn't a lease. It wasn't a giant private land that, like, your family had passed down. Like, that was one of the cool factors. And the other fact that it didn't matter what it scored, because it's so cool and so unique that anyone that looks at it will think it's insane.
Yeah, exactly. Buckmasters Nation on Instagram made an Instagram post for me, and they asked in the comments, what do you think this deer scores? And there's like 186 and 190 something, and it's like, he's not that big. but yeah, the Browtines, I don't
just
care.
Makes them look like it.
Yeah, it makes them look really, really big, and that was my first reaction when I shot him. Is, I'll send you the video later. I just shot a 200-inch whitetail. I kept saying. I was like starstruck, especially at last light. It's kind of hard to see exactly what he is. But yeah, no, there is that genetics out there in Ohio, not around where I was hunting. There's been big deer killed, but nothing like this, which is really cool. And I had no clue that this deer was there. I mean, I just showed up to Ohio. Like, I was in Massachusetts not, about 24 hours before that. So, it was
that
really
picture
surreal.
from that deer, the one that was sent to you?
Yes, that was from that deer. Yes, that's that deer. And in that picture, which was taken just a couple weeks before I got there, he had his other drop. So he had matching double drops, and they're pretty much in the same placement on the beams. I'm looking at them right now; they're pretty much in the same spot, and about the same length, which would have been even more insane.
It's just interesting. I can't tell the age of him because from that trail camera photo, I mean, he doesn't look ancient, but also their bodies just can be so different that, like, you can't tell. Like, did you guys check out the teeth or ever send it in? Or?
Yep. So I had the teeth checked out by a person here in New York State, and the lady that looked at his teeth and checked out his jaw for me sent it into her, and she aged the deer at 3.5 years old.
You got to be kidding me.
I mean, he did not have a long nose. He only weighed 172 pounds. He was not that old. Like, he didn't have that big swoop back or that big belly or anything, and he wasn't 200 pounds. You know, he was 168, 170 pound deer pre-rut.
So
you know,
was he as far? I mean, that's not uncommon. I think the Jordan buck, they aged that one. Obviously, it's hard to base off the tooth wear in like biologists versus like sending it into a lab. That's the only true way to kind of know. But when they test it, it's interesting to like see. I think the Jordan buck and the other ones, like they've almost all been under 5 years old. One of them was 3 years old, but it's because they get shot before they get to like that 250-inch size, like some people see in Ohio or Iowa. It's like those deer just are so exceptional with their genes that they just grow way different. Like a buck like that would have to be 7 to 9 years old in New England, but they just have, I don't know what it is, whether it's the genetics, minerals, people feed them a lot. That's crazy.
Yeah, those trail camera pictures I sent you are, are off of somebody's private land feeder. You know, it's like this big public piece that's surrounded all by private, and you drive by on the roads and you'll see a blind out there with a giant feeder and a bunch of corn below it. But you're not allowed to bait on public land.
Sure.
So I think a lot of those public land deer kind of got pushed deep into the public from the private pressure and like the outskirts public pressure. So I think maybe he was just deeper in and he understood, to not go to those deer feeders at daylight. And, I think those older deer, they know after a while, they get really scared of bait piles and stuff. I've heard from the locals.
Oh, 100%. Every deer is different. So that's the cool thing about like deer from what I've heard is, so I've never baited in my life. I've never killed anything over bait ever never, no desire to really do that. But I understand in Ohio, since everyone does it, it's kind of like, oh, if you don't do it, you're out of the game. But every deer is so different, and Lee Ellis talks a lot about that from Seek One. He's like, some deer just hate bait piles. Like, absolutely, like, won't go anywhere near them. But then other deer, it's like it's a super effective tool. So it's interesting how each buck can be different. And what I'm curious about is, do you think he could have walked, like, side-hilled that ridge, or do you think he was a mountain goat and just came straight up, to, like, on top of it?
There's no way he could have came up the side. It was vertical behind me and vertical to the right of me. And, when I went and recovered him, he went straight back down to where he came out of from. And it was vertical. I mean, there's no way he could have sighed and swooped around. I doubt it, because it'd be more difficult for him.
He wasn't going to run into anyone that way, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it was either that or he was just so fired up and wanted to get back to his bedroom where he heard all the commotion that he was just, I'm going to go straight up this hill. I don't care. I'm going straight up.
I've seen that happen in central New Hampshire, like through boulders and stuff. Like a lot of times people will be like, oh, deer don't want to walk through this stuff. I've seen tracks in some places where I would never think a deer would walk. Because we think as humans, like, oh, deer are the same way. They want to take the easiest route. The does might, the young bucks might, but those mature bucks, a lot of times they walk in different ways 100 yards off a path than another deer. Even just to scrapes, they take different trails. So it's just, that comes with pressure, but obviously he had a lot of pressure and there's other people hunting him. So it's just cool that you had the calling experience, because for me, I grunt with my mouth. I don't use grunt tubes anymore. And I've only rattled in deer out of state. I've never rattled one in New England, but I've grunted a lot in just with my mouth.
Yeah, I've never ever called a deer in with rattling or grunting. I haven't. I've always wanted to, but that stigma of there's not enough competition in New England, and there's it's really just you might hurt yourself more than you help yourself by cold calling. So I kind of put that in my back pocket going out to Ohio, because I knew that there's more competition out there. There's more diversity in age structure. The bunch of different personalities. Of course, there's more bucks, so they're all going to have different personalities. So I really think that calling was the key for me to be able to harvest this deer. Definitely was the reason I was able to harvest this deer.
Yeah, and it's also interesting, like your first sit is always your most effective. So that has to come down with like scent control and other things, but it's not a bad thing on your standpoint. If anything, it takes more skill to be able to find signs, set up on it, and get it on the first try. Because if you set up differently, you might not have had a shooting lane. How far was the shot, did you say?
The shot was 26 yards.
Okay, because you said top 10, so I was guessing it was somewhere in the 20s. So
Yeah. 26 yards, and it was a north wind, and so I'm facing north, and it was kind of coming across the ridge. So it was all of my wind was blowing into, again, like a vertical wall that I wasn't expecting for deer to come from. And I wasn't, like, when I shoot, I shoot with my, I hold my bow in my left hand and I hold my release in my right hand.
same.
I'm a righty. So I'm usually not planning on swinging to my right to shooting. I'm more comfortable shooting to my left.
Sure.
So that's why I expected deer to come. But he came from my right. So he finally walked into, like, where he's basically right in front of me. And that's where I made the shot.
And he was the only deer you saw?
He was the only deer that I saw from a tree stand in Ohio for that year. Yes. I didn't see a squirrel. I mean, I didn't see the woods. It was quiet, low wind, very, very quiet. And I could hear, like, my calls, through the bowl that was behind me, like echoing off of, the walls of the bowl. And I thought, if there's deer close and they're fired up, they're going to hear it. Wherever it is, he's going to hear it.
If you're on a ridge, I would agree that that's one of the most effective things, because also if he's down there, he knows he won't be able to visually see it. When you have people calling in fields or different places, if they'll come in, but then what they'll do, same thing as elk, if they don't see anything or they can visually see and not, like, see another deer, why would they come in?
Right.
If they can't smell and see, which is their two top survival instincts, if they can't see or smell it, then they're not going to do it. But if he has to come up a ridge just to see what's going on, then of course it's going to make him a little bit more like, oh, I wonder if that is real. So
exactly, yeah. And I had that in the back of my mind when he was on top of that ridge, and he was kind of getting antsy and apprehensive if he wanted to keep coming on top of the ridge or if he wanted to go back down into the bowl. And, you could tell that he was looking and he was searching for what was going on. And then towards the end of him being on the ridge before I shot him, he was really wary of, like, what is going on? This doesn't make any sense. There's not a deer here and there's a ton of calling. What is going on? You could tell that he was confused. So I really know I need to make it happen before he turns around, because he was getting ready to turn around and disappear out of my life for good. And I was like, oh, I need to make it happen now. And I made it happen. I was joking with my buddies before I left, some other hunting buddies from Vermont, and they were kind of busting my chops and saying, if a giant steps out in front of you, you're not going to be able to do it. You're going to flip out. You're like, I don't even know what you're going to do. And I thought the same way. I'm like, oh my gosh, if I see a big one like that, like, I don't even know what will happen to me. I might have a heart attack.
Yeah.
But so when I saw him, I knew that I needed to make it happen. There was so much pressure behind me from my friends that didn't go, that were supporting me and going, and my friends that were in tree stands and other spots of the public, or just scouting. And I cannot believe that I was able to pull it off in the end.
And you don't have to say, like, where, but, like, I've never hunted Ohio. I have some buddies that are there that I'm actually going to try to go this year for the first time ever.
Awesome.
But
southeastern Ohio, and it's about...
Interesting. I wonder how far that is from my sister-in-law's family, because they're all from Ohio. So I never have thought about it. Like, I've loved hunting since I was 16, been obsessed with it. I would shed hunt and have trail cameras before I hunted, because my British stubborn parents wouldn't let me go hunting by myself. So I'd have to, like, convince them. And I played 4 or 3 varsity sports and 4 sports in high school. So I, like, was always busy with basketball. I never had time to hunt with practices and different things. So obviously that's right during the season. So it's kind of cool how we all find our way And I am a little biased, but I think New England hunters are some of the best in the country, and I think you were able to get it done for that reason, but I'm a little biased.
No, I might be a little biased too, but I 100% agree. Like I said before, it's not finding sign that's difficult there. It's just finding which sign to hunt. And in New England, it's just a matter of finding sign, and you're happy to sit on a rub line. Like any rub line, you're happy to sit on because there was a buck there at one point. Like that's great sign to hunt. But out there, it's like you need to pick and choose which sign you hunt, which makes like the difference between like a good hunter and like a really good hunter, in my opinion, is guys that can pick which scrape to hunt or which set of sign to hunt. And that's what I was obsessed with, like watching these guys. Yeah, even like with or without trail cameras, or even with trail cameras, in pieces. Like I was just obsessed with why they pick certain scrapes, like a community scrape or scrape line, like why they're choosing that sign to hunt, like what else is around that sign that makes them want to hunt there. And I just did pounds and hours of research on YouTube to figure out like how these Midwest guys are killing these giant deer.
Yeah. And just to close out, did anyone else from your group get a deer while you guys were there?
Unfortunately, no, they did not. Some close encounters with some small deer, some basket racks, but no, they never did. And the guys that we were with from Tennessee that were parked across from us in the camping ground, they did shoot like a nice like 120s 8-pointer. But other than that, no.
Could you see big bucks you just couldn't hunt them if they were on like private? Like if you were to drive around, is it like other Midwest states where it's like, oh well, I'll never get permission there, but I can see big bucks anytime I want driving around? Or
no, honestly, it's not a lot of it's big woods. It's kind of it's private land, not a lot of big fields. It's kind of like almost kind of like hunting back home. Smaller fields but big pieces of woods and rolling hills. So you really couldn't see deer a lot. Like, oh, I wish I could hunt that piece because there's a big deer in that cornfield every night.
Yeah.
It wasn't like that where we'd go around glassing. It was more just drive around in the truck and see if there's any deer in like a small field or like see any like sign on the side of the road or something like that. It wasn't big fields, no.
And how big was the chunk that you killed them in for as far as public? If you were going 2 miles in, it was probably a pretty big chunk. But
oh yeah, I mean the chunk was, if I can pull up Hunt Stand really quick, and it was it was like a chunk inside of a bigger chunk. I mean it was over 1,200 acres of just a chunk of woods, like no fields, all public, and I was basically in the dead middle of it.
Yeah, the reason I ask that is because a lot of times what I'll find is there will be bucks that will follow that private, but they'll go into public pieces that are a lot smaller, but they're not on those giant pieces of public. So sometimes in New Hampshire last year, I killed a buck and he was probably on a 160 acre piece, and then he was surrounded by a bunch of private land that was either posted or unposted, and then there was a giant like 3,000 acre piece of public, but he wouldn't go there, at least during the daylight is what I found. So he was kind of tucked away on that spot where he felt like he was pretty safe. So what I did was I got permission for a mass buck. I could have hunted it. It was unposted private, but what I did was like, so the cops didn't get called on me, as I knocked on a door to like, hey, can I park here and cut through your property to access the public? Because I knew that the other hunters that had 8 tree stands out for this deer, they were all going to be 400 yards away and out of the game because he wasn't going to get there by then. So that's what I kind of found for me. So I was curious if it was like an overlooked piece or if there was just tree stands everywhere.
I mean, I've been to different pieces of this public 2 years ago, and the first spots that I hunted, you would see a tree stand every 100 yards. Yeah. And I didn't know if it was just, like, I just don't think I was knowledgeable enough in the area 2 years ago. But when I got into this piece where I killed this deer out of, there was not a sign there was not a boot track, there was not a tree stand, there wasn't a trail camera around anywhere. Compared to, like, I'd get texts from my buddies in different spots of the, giant piece of public that we were hunting. And they were sending me pictures of trail cameras left and right, and like, oh my gosh, I can't find an unpressured spot anywhere around here. So they kept running into a bunch of pressure, and I think that's why they weren't able to capitalize.
That's fair. Well, I'm glad that you got it done. It sounds like you're a really good guy, and if people want to go check out the story more, they can see it on the Ohio Big Bucks or the Buckmasters thing. But
yeah, I'd love to. They can just check out my Instagram too. I have a fishing gear company that I started 2 years back with a friend of mine called Buzzer Rocks, and we make stuff for tournament bass fishermen. So we make the first spray that stops fish from bleeding, and we make live well treatment for tournament bass fishermen.
There you go. I used to do bass fishing treatment, so that's awesome. That's really cool. Is it like the pebbles that turn the liquid in the live well blue and stuff like that to like coat them, or what is it?
Basically, yeah. So we have tablets, and we have 3 different kinds of tablets: an oxygen tablet, a nutrients and vitamins tablet to keep those fish alive and de-stressed, and we have a sedative tablet for bass. So sometimes, you open your live well and you get bass running around, hit their head, or try to jump out of the live well and hurt themselves. So we make a sedative tablet, kind of keeps them calmed down and de-stresses them in the live well. And then we just make a spray that stops fish from bleeding, whether it's on the gills, the tongue, or the throat, for tournament guys to keep their fish alive.
Yeah, I used to run into that problem a lot with like smallmouth. Sometimes they would bleed a bunch, so I'd have to like pour some people
Mountain
say
Dew.
Coke. I'd use Mountain Dew.
Yeah.
Gatorade.
Yeah. We're the Mountain Dew replacement. That's what we call ourselves.
Exactly. There you go. Hey, well, I appreciate your time, and we'll have to text more. Send me those videos. I want to see that. That's hilarious.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Kyle, thank you so much for having me on, and just what you've been doing with KBB Outdoors is awesome, and I'm just super glad to be a part of it. Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Have a good one.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
Yep. Bye.
Bye-bye.